Hey, everybody! Welcome to another MoGraph podcast. I'm your host, Matt Milstead. I am super excited about this episode. It's been a while since we've had you on, Jules, and I am really, really excited. There is so much that has been announced over the past few days, really. So
Yeah,
I'm excited to get into it. But welcome to the show, CEO of Otoy, Jules Urbach. Thank you.
it's so good to be back. It's been a while, but I think this was a great time to reconnect.
Yeah,
It's been a
absolutely. I think the last time I saw you was RenderCon. You know, we didn't
oh
really have
yeah.
that much time to talk and everything. You were everywhere. It was an absolutely awesome event. One of my favorite of the year. It was super, super fun. And I hear you guys are probably going to do it next year. Is that right?
For sure. April 16th to 17th. So everybody should clear their calendar, be there in LA. It'll be a 2-day event this year. So I think we're and
2 days.
we're
Wow. That's
mhm,
awesome. That's super
yeah.
awesome.
And I,
Are
I loved I loved this year's. It was great. I'm
It
so glad
was
you enjoyed it.
so good. One of my favorites. So I was lucky enough to actually help y'all out with some of the social posts and editing those together and stuff. So I
Mhm.
got to see every single one that I missed. You know, and my favorite
Yeah.
that I just kept going back to was your kind of future of rendering and stuff like that. That talk, it was awesome because seeing the stuff that you were talking about with like AI and being able to it's like you're showing these videos that you generated and it's like wait a second, there's like basically 3D information there and stuff like
hmm
that. It was very, very cool, very inspiring in especially in this new like how do we work AI into a production pipeline and stuff like that. It was really cool to see.
Yeah, no, it felt very, very prescient because I was talking about things. I mean, going back to April, which was like, 6 billion years ago in terms of
Yeah.
AI's land, right? Because things changed so much. And I remember showing like, here are all the video models. I don't think VO3 had even launched, or maybe it's like the thing that I feel very proud of is that in that talk, I had shown that you can take something from a generative model and you can bring that into Octane, right, as a neural object, and you can convert it. I mean, 2026 can load splats. And we just partnered on Black Friday, right, with World Labs, which can generate splats. It's one of the
Yeah.
first generative models that just spits out, we've had world models for a while. Those are basically an entire scene is generated, not an image, not a video, not even a 3D model, a whole world. And yes, you could freeze that and save that as a model. But the truth is, a splat is a lot more interesting than a traditional 3D model because it's got all the ray trace, global illumination stuff is all built in. And you can sort of load that at today, right, in
Mm-hmm.
Octane, and that's why we sort of partner with them. Okay, here's like a 3-month thing. The World Labs generate your splats, but what's interesting is the next version of Octane, we're going to be able to save a splat, and we're working with them and with other generative models like LTX. Like, granted, that currently video models can take a first frame and a last frame. Imagine that it could take a 3D object, and that can be sent as a splat for now. Like
Mm-hmm.
eventually, direct connection to the between the renderer and a generative model will allow you to do way more interesting things. But the stuff I was showing back at RenderCon was the beginning of that. Yeah, beginnings of that, and to show that you could take even something that's splat-based data and you can relight it. Like we were doing stuff with Higgsfield, which
Yeah.
was able to do really good turntable stuff. So I was able to turn that into a splat and then bring that into Octane. But you have things like the glass and other things, very subtle reflections that were in there. But because they were, you have this alpha coverage in the splat, it is able to ray trace. And Octane can relight those things. They can do all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
crazy stuff in the current version. And future splat formats that are being standardized are going to have UV information. They're going to have material information, pretty much like a normal mesh. And Octane will be able to save splats with that information as well. It's a really wild pipeline, and it does make the intersection of AI rendering and traditional CG rendering and blending those together much more viable in the very short term.
Yeah, I have been very excited about and have played around quite a bit with Octane, Gaussian splats with the newest
hmm
version and stuff, and I've been just blown away by the ability to relight and stuff like that. It's like
hmm
no other render engine has that, you know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I think V-Ray added sort of splat rendering, but it's nothing like the stuff. I don't think. I mean, I love Lotto and I love those guys.
Yeah.
I don't think it's what we have. I think what we built is beyond that, and I think where we're going with that is even further. So
Mm-hmm.
it is something where you could treat a splat like pretty much like any other 3D object, and it is possible to do reflections. I mean, they just show up like any other path traced object, and it's full path tracing. This stuff in 2027 where you go into real time means that you effectively can have a real time mode with those pieces in there. We'll talk about the real time stuff, I'm sure, at some
Yeah.
point shortly. But it's a great starting point to sort of understand, because splats came out of neural rendering. Before splats, there was something called NERFs, which are neural radiance fields, which
Yeah.
you generate these really heavy, and these are truly AI objects, right? They're basically, you have a neural network generating that. And somebody along the way created a paper. I was like, well, you can save these things as little ellipsoids with alpha channels, and that's what a splat is. It's really fast to render. You don't need to have all the heavy, AI stuff in there. But it came pretty much from an AI trained object. And there's still, a layer, sort of something beyond splats, which are basically a total neural object. We have it for the faces. So the stuff I showed at RenderCon was like, this is the future. Like, we have this just for faces. And yes, it can be driven live in real time from a video or a performance, but that can be true of anything in your 3D scene. And I think the world models are eventually going to try to cover that. But having something where your 3D object can be transformed into a latent space object, more powerful than a splat, it'll be lighter weight. And that's where we want to try to get to in the next year is introducing those pieces. But it'll feel like any other 3D object. It'll just have a lot more dynamic properties, and that's going to be very exciting.
That's awesome. One other question I had about RenderCon, because I've just been so excited to talk to you about the RenderCon the talk that you gave. You showed off the it was the part with the penguin where you put the penguin face on you, and it was real time. Like, what's the process with that? Because it's like you're showing off absolutely amazing tech where it's like you don't have any dots on your face, and it looks so photorealistic and reacts perfectly with your movements. What are you doing with that? Like, how does that work?
So that is our Otoy has built really one built-in generative. I wouldn't call it generative model. It's more like it maps the input of your camera feed, right? And it builds a 3D model inside there, and then it applies a mask onto it. And the mask can come from a CG render. It can come from something that is photogrammetry. And in the case of the penguin, like, we just had the team build it's effectively a 3D model from photographs, right, of what Colin Farrell's makeup is. And I wanted to test it on myself and show that at RenderCon, because to me, that's the whole thing is you can replace the 4 hours in the makeup chair with this. And we've been showing this stuff for a while. Like, earlier tests, I showed the two-phase stuff and other things, but this was really powerful. And the software behind that is a built-in piece of software that we've developed, at Otoy for years. We've been showing this. We've been using it on our Star Trek pieces for Kirk and for Spock, and it's been great. We have two actors, by the way, that perform. As Sam Witwer, who's a veteran actor, 25 years, performed as Kirk in our last piece. But the software, so we can now do about 6 of these heads on a single 4090 with a live 4K feed.
Wow.
And it renders live. And you can also, by the way, feed it an Octane viewport, and it'll apply that live. And you can freeze the head and turn it into a splat or an animated splat and bring that into Octane and relight it. And that's sort of the magic, is once you record it, or once you feed it, you can also record the performance or video offline and feed it back in. You get all these different tools from it. But the real-time part is critical, because when you're actually the actor performing, is that you can see how it works and you can learn how to make it work. As a director, the same thing. We would never have gone, people are, how do you get the quality in this Star Trek short you did with unification to be so good, like relative to other things where people have done face replacement and stuff like that. And I think the biggest delta is that in real time you see the thing almost perfectly rendered, and those subtleties make it truly an artist-driven effect. And I think that's a big deal. So I would say that getting it to be this quality and in real time has been a great engineering challenge. One of the things we're very proud of. I have not seen that anywhere else out there. I mean, I think that there are tools that kind of do parts of that, but not at the same quality or speed or fidelity that we're able to achieve. So that tool, for example, will be something where we would bring in to Otoy Studio or Octane, where you could basically load in a face and apply that over something that is either in the scene or in the post frame buffer, right? You can apply it to both and have it work. And I think that the faces that you're seeing, the fact that it's doing that in real time and deforming, that's not a splat, that's a neural object. And that neural object is fully rigged. It's able to basically, be relit. And it has all of those mechanisms in there. And it can be generated from a 3D model or something else. But once it's sort of baked into a neural object, it's like, what's beyond splats is this. and you'll be able to load that 3D, that face, that mask, and apply it over anything in the scene. Or there'll be things other than faces, right? It could be plants, it could be anything, but you'd have to effectively build something for that type of object. Or possibly, with the progress Google's making with Genie 3, which is their real-time world model,
Hmm.
maybe those kinds of things emerge out of those large world models. But I don't see that necessarily happening immediately. So in the meantime, having specific models that do specific types of neural objects feels like it's the right approach for now.
Yeah, that's cool. I was watching one of the other talks, where I can't remember his name, who it was, but they had brought in a bunch of, you were shooting the Star Trek
Yeah.
piece. They needed a bunch of extra like grips and lighting people and stuff, so they brought some people over who had worked on Star Wars, and they're
Yeah.
seeing the real-time stuff and they're like, why don't we have this? Which I think
Well,
is
yeah.
so funny.
Well, I mean, I mean, there was a lot of people that saw the tests we were doing. So David Ellison, who now owns Paramount and is now in charge of Star Trek,
Hmm.
was one of the people that was seeing as we're doing unification, and he was like, he's interested in Otoy software and the production tools and everything, because I think his mandate is owning a studio. It's like, well, we got to make things work with the latest tech. And he was really impressed by the Sam Witwer test. Sam Witwer portraying Kirk in real time, showing that. He's
Yeah.
like, I've never seen that. We also, so that was great. We had, Kevin Feige. I give a big thank
Yeah.
you. He's a huge Star Trek fan. We got a little favor from him for one part of the production. He also was seeing that stuff live. But what's interesting is that Rob Bretto and John Knoll, who work at ILM, and I know John Knoll for a while. He's an Octane user. He did all a bunch of stuff in Octane for Moto, first actual user of the Render network. They came by because Sam Witwer does all the Star Wars stuff. So everybody at Lucasfilm was kind of aware of what we were doing, I think, for unification, because Sam was like, I'm working on this other project. And
Hmm.
and they got work. So, it was interesting seeing the ILM folks come over, and they really did love what we were doing. I mean, it's a tool that I think will be useful for a lot of productions, especially when you're, trying to do the effects that we're doing or de-aging actors. So it's definitely, an exciting frontier. And what I think is great about it is that it's not like, generative stuff. I mean, you still have an actor, and Sam, we're trained 2 years to play Kirk. He worked with us on the text so that it made it even better. So
Hmm.
I think that it's one of these really awesome bespoke, tools that have been built with a lot of artist feedback, and I can't wait for that to be in more people's hands as well for their own productions.
Are there any big studios currently using it, or are you kind of keeping that
I,
close to the
they
heart
are,
to
but they're
like?
all NDA. So I
Yeah.
mean,
All right.
other than revealing that David Ellison and the ILM guys and other folks have seen it or whatever, I guess most of the things that are in production now using it, because it's fairly new,
Yeah.
are under NDA. But I mean, you'll see some cool stuff with it. I'm more interested though in getting this not just in the big studios, but in people's hands, so that they can build a character and they can have this kind of really beautiful, facial rigs generated. It doesn't have to be from a real person. It could be from
Hmm.
something that you build and sculpt yourself. And even as we're doing like aliens and things like that, there's a lot of really cool applications of this tech for facial performance. And I think there's a lot of work that we've done there that I think will be really, really great. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Someone was asking in the chat where you can see the videos. If you go to rendercon.ai, you can watch all the RenderCon videos and stuff. I recommend all of them because they're all so fantastic.
Yeah.
You had a great selection of speakers, and I'm
Yeah.
really excited about next year. That should be fun.
Me too.
But the big announcement for, well, there were multiple, but of course the Black Friday sale. I think Otoy is probably the last company in the world to actually release their Black Friday sale on Black Friday, which I think is just so funny. Everyone's releasing them in October now, But it's like everyone's really excited. Everyone was also wondering whether GSG Plus was also going to be on it, which I'm super excited to say it is. Another year for new subscribers or returning Black Friday subscribers. Is that correct?
Yeah, everyone pretty much. I mean, I think it's for for all folks that whether you're returning or new. Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, I'll be very honest about the process, and this is largely on me because I'm not going to say I'm a perfectionist, but I really do want to try to make the Black Friday stuff work really well. And so to pull the amount of things that we do in there and to make it all work, it does take pretty much up until that Friday.
Yeah.
And I'm also like, I mean, there's like the blog and the email and all the pieces and just getting all that ready to go. it just can't be done earlier in November, much less October.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much, now we did launch the shop page on Thursday. So that was a huge improvement over the years before, where it just all went out on Friday. So
Yeah.
people had a day to buy the stuff. And then, the email blast thing went out within 24 hours. But, it is a great bundle, and I'm very proud of it. And obviously, we thought last year was the last time we would do this GSG bundle, but
Hmm.
in some ways, the fact that Kitbash and GSG are now one company, it opened up the opportunity to maybe revisit that and think about. I think there's really more interesting things we could be doing, especially with them being one company. So I think for
Hmm.
next year's Black Friday, hopefully we'll come up with something even more interesting. But I think for this year, I was really proud that we were able to pull that off. And Octane Studio is pretty cheap. It's like 16 something a
It's
month or whatever
yeah,
if you amortize that. So yeah,
1665 euros a month.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like someone said in the chat, it's an insta buy. It's the one thing that
yeah,
I know I will always buy every year on Black Friday. So
yeah,
so many great tools. You've got Cascader, which is
yeah.
really cool. Cascader just released some very cool AI tools where it's almost like you're creating keyframes and then it's using AI
Hmm.
to do the movements
Interpolate.
and stuff, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Then you've got Machina in Infinitum.
Don't worry,
Infinitum.
I have trouble.
Yeah.
But they do great stuff with Vectron and camera effects, and they do all
Yeah.
these amazing OSL shaders. So it's like a no-brainer for us to bring them in. And some of those things are paid add-ons. So we're like, well, let's bundle this with the Black Friday
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and they're great. I mean, there's some really beautiful shaders in there that I think people will love, and always a pleasure to bring them in. World Creator as well.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
Moai 3D, which is a fantastic hard surface modeling tool, and plenty of others. There's just a lot of great stuff in that in this release.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. And it's such a good deal. It's such a good deal. It's very exciting. But the other big news that it always seems to come together with the Black Friday deals is the release of 2026. And
yeah,
then the
a
preview of
preview.
2027, which
Yes.
I was just blown away by 2027 and all the new AI additions that are coming with Octane Studio.
Yeah.
Let's I guess let's start with 2026 because that's kind of
Yep.
been out and slowly releasing, correct?
Yep.
Over the past
It's
few
not. It's
months,
not.
yeah.
Yeah, it's been in beta, and so
Yeah.
we took the beta label off, and well, our Black Fridays are typically do have a template people probably picked up on, which is we have a stable release, and we showed the next version. And so last year I think we had three versions. We had 2024 went stable, we had a preview of 2025, and I think we even had a preview of 2026, which is
You
of course
might
now the
have, yeah.
currently released version. So there was a lot. This time we did 2026. The beta label got ripped off, and that includes the splats, trace sets that people asked for forever. A
Yeah.
lot of really great features in that release. And with 2027, I just got the build that had probably one of the coolest features, which is the real-time stuff that morning. So it's not quite yet ready for users to test. I only had hours with it myself before, and those videos that are posted in there from this 5090 videos I'm pointing to right here. It's like
Yeah.
a PC workstation. I'm not going to turn the iPad around to show it, but it's like that was me recording videos and trying it out and really making sure that before we showed it, I wanted to make sure the real time stuff was working with all of our production scenes. And we could probably go into the history of Brigade and real time and our previous releases because all of that led to this update. And 2027, the other major feature that of course we're putting out there is a really beautiful anime renderer with really
Yeah.
beautiful edge rendering. You I think had first done one of these interviews with me in SIGGRAPH 2018, where we showed the anime renderer, and it was a separate piece of software. That has evolved into something much better, like what we have now, where the sketch and tune shading is just it's awesome. So
Yeah.
that'll be part of that release. And then of course one of the other major features is that we'll be able to generate splats and neural objects right from the scene. Like you don't have to pick a camera; you could just have the whole scene saved as a splat with all that extra
Yeah.
information in there. And that's going to be huge because that means you can then take your splats and bring that into other tools with all the Octane scene information in there, totally preserved. Even drop it into a web page, which is what we were showing, right? So if you go onto the release post, inside of the blog post, you can see There's an iframe with the we use Super Splat to basically play back the splats, but those are scenes out of Octane 2027, which is pretty awesome. But the real time piece is something that is it's like that's been a long time coming,
Mm-hmm.
and it's working pretty great. The videos, I think, I have to say, I don't think they do it justice. I think seeing it on your own machine, moving it around, and it can be at really high resolutions. Like I was rendering it at like almost 4K, and it was still doing 30 to 40 frames. It depends on the scene, of course, but even if it's 20 frames a second, or
Yeah.
17 frames a second, who cares? It's noise free, path traced, like nothing's baked, right? And it's not and by the way, it's not using denoising. So, you can add
Wow.
the denoising. Yeah, it's effectively, I mean, it is accumulating the samples, but it's a cache, like what we did with the Neuroradiance cache for 2026, which is kind of, it didn't really give you this. I mean, we're just, we're taking that to the next level, and that, calculating that there's a lot of other features that make it work so that you just don't see noise, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the effect. You just take your Octane scenes, whether it's subsurface scattering, all the spectral rendering stuff, and you just have a noise-free viewport. There's a little bit of like flashes and things like that, which we're fixing, but it's amazing. I was so excited to see it. And I think the big difference from, because we put out like, I think in 2022 we had the Brigade benchmark, which, had
Yeah.
and that was 4K 60 and all that, but it wasn't with Octane materials. It wasn't spectral rendering. It couldn't handle everything that you could throw at it, right? Volumes and all that stuff. I mean, this handles all of it. And that's a big thing. It's like people are like, where's Brigade? Where's Brigade? And I'm like, things for real time. I think putting out a separate renderer that is simpler and less feature complete than the one that people are already using for production is a choice, and it's one that we almost made and we were about to do for years and years and years. But it always, as I was testing it, as we were playing, I was like, this is going to force users to basically, not be able to use the scenes that they're used to using or to make choices, and that
Yeah.
really sucks. I never liked that idea, and I figured I'd rather wait year after year until we get it right. And around Octane 2022, we did say, hey, Brigade is coming into Octane, and there's a little real-time button. And if you use that button, all of a sudden the frame rate would go way up. You'd lose your AOVs, but you'd have this much faster viewport. Now, granted, if you're in Cinema 4D or in other tools, because it'd have to go through buffers, you wouldn't necessarily see that. But we've been working with Maxon, and I think in Unreal we've already solved it where you can get that fast viewport. Of course, it's in standalone as well. And in those DCCs where you have that sort of fast feedback, this real-time mode is going to be pretty great. But the big thing that we tried, I think in 2023, we were trying to do a temporal denoiser, which we yanked out, or maybe we put that in 2024.
Oh,
And
interesting.
the denoising stuff hasn't worked well. This does work really well, and it's just great. I mean, it just took a lot. It took an extra couple of years, I think, to get it right. But I can never go back to the non-real time mode and the viewport. I can't. Like and I've only had it for a couple of days, so
That's funny.
um, it is incredible. So I think once it's a little bit more, slightly more polished. I want to put out the alpha, I guess, or pre-alpha even for for Octane 2027. But I'm so excited for it. I mean, it is something where is it absolutely perfect right now? It's pretty damn close, but it's just a remarkable achievement, and I'm so happy. Granted, I'm testing on a 5090, but I think it also works pretty well on a 5070, at a
Yeah.
4090, and so on. So, if you have, I don't know about how well it would work on a 3090, but looking at the stats of the average Octane user, they seem to have like a 4090 or higher. I mean, even just
Yeah.
one, and this is all on one GPU, right? So it's not even
Yeah.
touching multi GPU. Yeah.
So is this only for viewport or is it for render as well?
I mean, you can certainly render with it. It's designed for the viewport. Right now, it's like we want to make sure that while you're moving the scene around and doing stuff, it is noise free. What you might find is, you've seen that from the videos as well, is that it just resolves so much faster that if you just want to, if you're happy with that noise free viewport, and there are things. I mean, if you turn it off and you start seeing all the noise and everything, there's a little bit. I mean, it's because it's skipping a lot of the later samples. Like maybe the GI is a little bit different. But the weird part is that if you let it have that, if you let it sit there for a little bit and then you move the viewport around, it remembers how it rendered with the higher samples in that area, and it'll bring that back in. And that's the part that is sort of
Interesting.
magical about it. And it doesn't take that long to get a pretty good sense of the scene, even with a lot of noise. And then, it's not even, as I said, it's not even denoising it. It's just intelligently filtering out the noise, and then, using anything where it has higher quality ground truth to replace that. And that seems to be the trick. And of course, if you change the lighting and everything, then There's a bit of like I would call it blurriness, not even splotchiness,
Mm-hmm.
which is nice. But barely, like you see those videos where it's like the lights changing, your objects are moving, and there's also a little bit of latency. Like sometimes we give it about like 100 to 200 milliseconds of latency when there is a lot of dynamic stuff moving, so that we just get you in a faster noise free or better noise
Mm-hmm.
free output. There'll probably be sliders to adjust that, but right now it feels pretty perfect to me. Like I'm loving it.
That's
So
exciting. And I'm assuming
yeah.
that feature is going to come to all the different DCC as well, correct?
It'll
Yeah.
be built in, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that I mean, one thing, even with a buffered viewport, you're still getting a noise-free, image at 30 frames a second feeding into that thing. So whether or not it's going to be at like 60 at 4K, that is for sure an Unreal. And I think I know we'll have to look into where we are with the max on frame buffer thing.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing you'll always be able to do is you'll always be able to pop out the standalone viewport and get that thing going. I mean, I think that certainly for a lot of the major DCC tools, we'll have direct frame buffer access in there. And I mean, certainly for C4D, Houdini, Blender, even, I mean, we're one of the big sponsors for Blender, and
Yeah.
a lot of that is to figure out how to get it better, how to get Octane better integrated in Blender. And they know that has to happen. It's not just, and it's like if we work with them on an API that lets that happen, then it'll help other renderers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's great work. And of course, Blender is free, and we're doing a lot of great work, and we can host Blender on Otoy Studio, and you can take your Blender scenes, you can feed that into another node and all that with even with other renders besides Octane, like with Cycles. But there's millions of Blender users. It's a growing market. Hard to monetize, but it does.
Yeah.
There's it's even for the Blender guys. That's why they need sponsors. But that's just the way it is. It's obviously it's changed the game for a lot of 3D. People getting into this space. It's very powerful. It keeps getting better.
It's a gateway drug.
But we're yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I am excited about the Unreal integration. So one thing that I years and years ago when I was getting into Unreal, I tried Octane because I was thinking it was going to be more real time, which it wasn't. It was just like using a regular renderer. But you get beautiful Octane renders.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about is if we're able to run real time in Octane, are you able to build a game using Octane as the render engine? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Because first of all, when we announced, I mean, it's crazy for me to think that it's been about 10 years since I went up in Unity's thing and announced that we're going to be doing that. And the thing that was always about being able. Unity had these ambitions to be an offline renderer as a DPC. And the thing is, they built Cinemachine. Adam Mayhill, who's no longer at Unity, was one of these great sort of creative minds driving that. So a lot of people I used to know at Unity aren't no longer there, but they still, we still support that plugin. But the idea was you could also run Octane and drive a game. I think there's videos of me in Unite or showing the tanks demo running in Octane.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at that point, with RTX in particular, you have hardware ray tracing. They can do moving objects and things like that. So there's absolutely a place where you can do dynamic content that's running with that new real-time mode, and you'll get path trace quality graphics. Now, will it be as fast as the Unreal rasterizer? Probably not. Will it be faster than the Unreal path tracer? Yes. And I think that's sort of where Octane fits in, is that, I mean, and there's also other things too, which is you have to think about the fact that Unreal can load splats, and we can take anything in Unreal and feed it into Octane, and we can generate a splat with Octane quality rendering on there and feed that back in. So there's so many tools that you're going to have to basically supercharge the real-time aspects of it, and whether that's completely dynamic or live, or some of it is pre-packaged, right? Say a splat is a pre-packaged version of an asset. It's not it's not as dynamic. I mean, you can certainly explode it and do all sorts of things with it, but the truth is the ground truth thing that created is probably more has more dynamism or more degrees of freedom. But I do think that with Unreal, I mean, we use it for virtual production, and so the reason why the Unreal plugin for us is so important is it's essential. Like everything that we're doing for the Star Trek stuff, we have Unreal on set driving those live viewports. And then we do things where it's like, well, there's no way Unreal's going to load this Octane scene, so we just have Octane pre-computed, similar to what we did with the splats, but light fields, all those other things. And I want to merge those things together. And I think there's a lot of virtual production workflows that could benefit from that. So my thinking is, yeah, I mean, Octane in real time is now noise-free path tracing is a thing. That quality is great. I will say that Unreal's quality is also pretty great. I mean, you look
Hmm.
at things that they can do with Lumen, for example. I mean, you know, it's not baked lighting anymore. It's pretty good. Is it the quality you would want to have for final frame rendering? I mean, there's some things that are rendered in Unreal straight out of
Yeah.
it, like not even the path spacer, just straight up the rasterizer, and it's good enough. And I think that's totally acceptable. I mean, there's certainly things where that, you know, that's what I'm saying. For sure, the Octane real time mode is going to be good enough for offline video, because if Unreal is, this is obviously even higher quality. But you know, I will say, Epic, you know, Tim Sweeney is and King LeBury, longtime friends of Otoy. They're investors in Otoy.
Hmm.
They're back in our 2019 round, I think. And so I think that doing stuff with them is really important. I mean, they have a really important place in the ecosystem for certainly for real time virtual production. And I think a lot of games are built in Unreal. I mean, they're just moving from custom engines to Unreal. So by supporting Unreal with Octane and with all the services we're building, we're just going to get a lot more potential customers, which is cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's cool. Another question I was going to bring up, I believe this is in 2027, but an actual AI material where a
yes.
material node where you can put in a prompt and it creates a PBR material with all of your, specular, roughness, metallic,
Yeah.
normal. That's
Yeah.
that's something I have wanted for years.
Yeah, I think everybody has wanted that. So we're building that in 2027, and it can work from a text prompt. I mean, which, you know, we can get into how I look at AI and prompting all that stuff, but it can also work from an image. So you can feed it an image, and it'll figure out how to approximate that as a material with all the different channels. And I think that's really important, because I think material creation is sort of, you know, you know, there's something to be said, even if you just want a mesh and you know, if you're looking for some third-party library, being able to generate a mesh even from an image, by the way, which we now support on Otoy Studio. So we have all these different, you know, some of them are working closely. It's like the Demos guys that do Rodin is really good. I have to say, ByteDance, you know, they're a social media company, does some great models. I think, you know, we have Seed, I think it's Seed 3D that they put out there that I've been testing, and it generates, you know, pretty good meshes also with PBR materials, or at least
Hmm.
Rodin does. But I think having a material generator built in, and this will run locally, so this is not going to be some cloud service. Like, we want to ship this
Wow,
inside of
that was going to
Octane.
be my next
At least,
question.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the plan. You know, we'll see, because I mean, I sometimes get caught. And I'm like, this is because until it's in users' hands, you never know. But it should run locally. That was the idea that we have, so that it can run locally, and therefore you don't have to, you know, you can run it in offline mode or whatever, and it should work. And yeah, I mean, I think that's something that'll be extremely helpful. And especially if you have a reference to something you want to try to approximate as material, um, I think references are much different than prompts. Like, if you know you want
Hmm.
something that looks like this pillow, or this type of burlap, or this kind of, like, you know, terrain or something, being able to generate a material from that is useful. And I think even in some ways, generating a mesh, you know, for something that you just, you know, that is an object out there that you want some sort of model of, especially if you can generate the right materials for it and all that stuff, is
Hmm.
very helpful, very useful. um, Otoy Studio has those pieces. So if you want to go there, if you're not a strong modeler, for example, and you want to, you know, and if you have different photos, especially the more angles you have, the better. You can get a pretty good model of that. And what's also interesting is, I was saying this, you know, I think offline before the show started, is that, you know, if you have keyframes, if you render, you know, like six frames, for example, of different, you know, key points in your animation, being able to interpolate those with different things in those, between those frames, or even added, is something that is really useful. And we're working with a lot of the video generative models that we're bringing to Otoy Studio. We want to make them ready for these 3D pipelines, and make them useful for 3D artists, and not just like, I mean, I think text prompting as a starting point, like, yes, you can run those on Otoy Studio, but like, that is the least interesting and the hardest, I think, to control of all the
Yeah.
different things you could do with these kinds of tools. And to be fair, like, you're not going to get great consistent results unless you start with, in my opinion, like a 3D scene, and then add things on top of there, or put things into the scene to come, you know, into that. So I think that there's a lot of really great features that people may not be aware of, that you know, AI tools on top of 3D, or blending correctly in them, can really
Hmm.
supercharge. But the fact that we do have splats already running, or that with something like, well, already any AI model out that can generate a splat, and I think they all will soon. I think World Labs is the first that really does it. is going to have a 3D pipeline right off the bat that is useful. And those splats are not quite the same as a 3D model you get off a TurboSquid or
Mm-hmm.
something that you get from a sort of a photogrammetry tool. There's some more interesting pieces there, and the fact that you can take your 3D scene and turn it into a splat, then turn it into a 3D to a neural object, and then get that back. I mean, those things are going to be great. Like, it's up to us, I think, to show probably with the next RenderCon. I'll have a whole section of my talk devoted to that, how those things can work. But yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting.
That's exciting. Talk to me about Octane Studio, because
Yeah, it's called Otoy Studio because it
Otoy
includes more than
Studio.
Octane. Or
Sorry.
so Otoy Studio. So last year for Black Friday, we had I think we had about 10 or 12 AI models you could run on the Render network, right? And
Yes.
they're still there.
Yeah, I've
So you
played
have
around with it
Runway.
quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's cool. So Otoy Studio is taking, I mean, effectively, it's the Render network is this decentralized system that has, that almost doesn't have a front end the way that Otoy Studio does. Otoy Studio is a whole bunch of front end pieces that are meant to drive demand to the Render network that could include everything that you'd want to do in AI. So there's I don't know, 700 different tools, and a bunch of them are AI models. But it also includes a video editor, 40 video editors. You can load in a splat, you can load in images, you can load in 3D files, and you can generate a timeline with those things, feed that back in to those other pieces, right? When we have, Octane or Blender, and those things are now live streamed, you can just test those on Otoy Studio. You can use that to drive 3D scenes inside of generative video models, for example, frame by frame. So the idea is that we want to put everything under one umbrella that allows you to blend what I think is going to be really interesting, and it's all within a web browser, right? So all these things, like you have a Canvas tool, which allows you to create these workflows.
Mm-hmm.
You can feed the results from one thing to another. Those things will all come together. I mean, basically, this is a project that is probably day one, right? The site literally went out, and so if you go to beta.otoy.ai, which is the landing page for the service, you'll be able to play with it. But it is in beta, and I think that by the time that we get to even RenderCon or this time next year, it'll be radically different. And by that I mean, I think the idea with this is that you'll be able to take anything you could do in 3D and and be able to work with that inside of a browser. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have Blender in the browser and Octane in the browser, and we have a license from Maxon brings C4D, maybe not without the UX, but at least your scene will load in there. And I think that and the workflows with that will be super interesting. But probably today, a lot of these things are the traditional workflows you might see on. We were talking about I love Weavy.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously a lot of stuff in there that's similar to Canvas. I will say that Canvas on Otoy Studio, one of the, it's something that I've been working with one of the devs on. The developer created Comfy UI, one of the 3 Comfy UI creators. So anybody that's using Comfy UI, the mandate for Canvas was, let's take what's powerful in Comfy UI, but make that much more artist friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And also make sure that everything that I have in mind for 3D, for neural rendering, and by that I also mean neural rendering in 3D, can work with the system. Because I think if you're building something that is not considering that, you're gonna hit a wall, and it's not gonna work, and it's not gonna be able to be future proof. So with that in mind, this stuff is really important. I do feel like what's out there today is very useful. I've been doing some great stuff with it, but it's still very it's primordial.
Mm-hmm.
I think even in the next 3 months, you're going to see a lot of dollar pieces converge. But today, you can use Canvas, you can use the, about 700 models. It's very simple to use. You can drop in images, you drop in videos to do video editing. And there are some really cool features for generating 3D objects, which is something immediately useful, I think. If you want to drop in a bunch of photos and try all the latest generative 3D models, right? 3D mesh generators, they're all there. And we also add these models pretty quickly. So, we worked with LTX Video. They're building an open weight video generative model that one of the first ones that could do 4K. And my thing with them was that I want you guys to be able to load a splat as a reference, not an image, right, but a splat, and then give me a video that gives me back an animated splat. So these partnerships are really important. Putting them on the roadmap is really valuable. I'll give you another example, Kling, even though of course people are like, oh, Kling is just generative video, whatever, but it's not. It's Kling 2.1 Pro, first and last frame, is one of the best keyframe interpolators I've ever seen for 2 Octane frames, right? So I told these guys, and by the way, Kling 2.5 doesn't quite have that. So they're working, and I said, what I need, guys, is I want to have a reference, before you guys get to a splat reference, just allow me to have first and last frame with a reference in the middle of it. So today they just released Kling
I
01
was
is
checking
on
that out
Otoy
earlier.
Studio.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, and I'm giving them feedback. I mean, I have a Slack channel with the Kling guys, and I'm saying, like, you're only there, but you got to have more. And so us working with these various partners to get them so that they support basically something that could be, that could be added, really in a way that's useful for 3D artists like ourselves coming from that pipeline is going to be great for them and great for artists. And I think that it also, if you have an improved Kling or LTX model on other services, terrific. But my goal is that we're ready to go with things that feed into that system. And the fact that these video model makers are so open to this kind of pipeline is really good, because I think in some ways, really, what's next or what's beyond just
Yeah.
simple prompting or image to whatever. And there's a lot, and a lot of that comes from the 3D world. So yeah, it's super exciting stuff.
Where does Octane fit into this Otoy Studio pipeline?
In the core, because from my perspective, so right now you have to save an image from Octane, and you can do that. I mean, you can see on the render network, right? You can take any of your rendered frames, you can feed that into the AI stuff that was on render, and that pipeline is like it's a bit of disconnected right now to Studio. But the idea is that you don't even have to go from a render network job. You can load in Octane 2027 live inside of a node, and you can mess around with your scene, and you can feed that into one of these models live, and basically generate a bunch of these scenes or views from that. And these models will evolve. Like, so World Labs is the best example I can give, where World Labs will spit out something that you can then bring. You saw my slide or my video from the announcement, which is I'm taking, World Labs has all these things on their site which you generate from, could be anything, right? Could be some of that stuff you can use from 3D models, but you can take those worlds and you can bring them in Octane in their full scene with reflections and GI and everything. And my goal would be that when you're mixing anything that touches the 3D space, Octane's in the middle of that, because that's where you have absolute control. So right now on Otoy Studio, right, there's a thing called Timeline. That Timeline loads in a web-based 3D viewer. You can load in, like FBX files. You can load in splats. You can load in videos, and those things could all be mixed together. But the idea is that will drive an Octane viewport in a very short order. I didn't have time to post those videos, but Otoy Studio, yeah, inside of that web-based thing, you'll have the Octane's core standalone thing, and you can also load in a C4D scene, right, with Octane. You can load in a Blender scene. And if it's Octane, and this is where I'm like, well, this is where Cycles and others don't quite add up. I mean, the fact that we can bring in objects that are splats or neural objects and send them back out, that's magical. So that's the vision. But yeah, and the great part is that I was thinking, oh, we're going to have noisy, real-time previews. Nope, not anymore. 2027. That is definitely not a problem. We will probably have to have like the equivalent of a 4090 running on the remote GPU, but we could also probably let you run that locally. I mean, the server that runs it is something that could be, it's like we do with Blender, right? Which is running a server that connects over HTTP to Blender itself. But yeah, I'm getting a little bit in the weeds, but it's pretty.
Yeah, I was
going
to say, expand a bit upon the 4D video editor, because that's really interesting to me. So just a step back a little bit, I have been saying from the very beginning, like, AI tools are really great, but most of the time it feels like you're just pulling a slot machine and hoping for the best.
Oh, it's crazy. I can't deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, being able to build in pipelines, specifically for production. And I do have to say, you as someone who is making short films, especially big scale short films, you understand what it takes in order to use AI correctly in a pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true. I mean, I think if we weren't doing the content that we were doing, it would just be guesswork, but because it's like, and I in my talks, I was like, we tried all the video generated models last year, like for that Star Trek short, and none of them worked. Like and we had like we went to Amit, who's the head of Luma Labs and the Runway guys, and it's like we had this one scene where you start from Aaron Westwood, beautiful. He created this beautiful garden, this park, and it goes to Captain Kirk's feet, which was a live plate, and we basically had to render it all the way to the plate at the end, and it was a hard thing to composite, but we did that. And I was like, wouldn't it be great if first and last frame from these video models could just make that happen without? And it didn't. Now today, it would work a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And for one thing, I remember saying they cling to one, Pro. I mean, that thing can do 2200 by 950. That is actually HD resolution, or higher, at 21 by 9, and that is useful. That resolution is the minimum you would need. But again, it's not 4K. I mean, there's still work
Mm-hmm.
to be done. But I do feel like what we're trying to build is stuff that is production ready. And I think that consistency gets solved when you actually have a 3D object, right? Even if you're doing a bit of slot machine work and you end up with a neural material or neural object, as long as that turns into a 3D object, you can then work with it as a 3D object in your scene.
Yeah.
Terrific. I mean, there is still a bit of experimentation, but when you're trying to get the final render, and it's like you could add things and add a finger, I mean, God help you, that's not going to be good. So,
Yeah.
that's why having. I mean, I think that the video model guys know this, and that's why they're interested, I think, in working with us, because if you could solve those problems with existing tools, which is how the industry's been built, and still benefit from some of those things. Like, I'll give you an example of being able to animate hair and fur and dynamics in clothing over something that's a rough approximation of that in 3D is incredibly valuable. Like, that's something that
Mm-hmm.
I've already seen as like, wow, that saves us time. And I can also make it so that I can, if you see some of the stuff I was doing in Canvas, like I can freeze Superman's cape, or I can animate to Superman's cape, and I can do that between two keyframes that are rendered in Octane, and I don't have to do the dynamics. I can have the dynamics be done as a neural render, and that's insane. And then I can save that back as a 4D Gaussian splat, or I can bring that back in as a if there's UV coordinates, I can feed that back into a position map, and all these
Mm-hmm.
things are super interesting. And the Cascade Earth thing, for example, does that all within effectively bone and skinning rates that are inside of a 3D model that you would already have. And there are 3D generators that can basically do skinning and bone and assets from a single photo or from a couple of photos, which you
Mm-hmm.
can also play with on Otoy Studio. So those pipelines are emerging, and I will say that the speed at which things move is so crazy.
Yeah.
I will say one thing to watch out for are the world models going to real time on a single GPU. That is not as far out as people might think. By single GPU, I mean like an H100, right?
Uh-huh.
But if you're seeing the work that Google's doing with Genie 3, and I keep mentioning that certainly since SIGGRAPH, I was like, I got to post this because it's remarkable. It's a real-time viewport. It's photorealistic. You can paint on the walls. You turn around, you go back, the paint is still there exactly as you painted it. It remembers your changes,
Mm.
and it's one of those things where I think that is probably going to be the point where that thing becomes usable on a single GPU, and you can feed it 3D models, or you can, all these things. That's going to be pretty compelling. I mean, that is truly like what world models are aiming towards. But the only thing that I've seen that really fulfills that is Genie 3. And right now I'm not sure exactly what the compute power of that is. It's probably a lot. It could be
Yeah.
a number of B200s or something like that,
Yeah.
right? So but it will scale. That stuff could be made faster. And Amaj, who's one of our greatest stability AI and been a partner of ours, is like he's pretty convinced that those kinds of world models will be doable on a GPU within a year, single GPU, possibly
Wow.
consumer ones.
Wow.
And yeah, so that'd be great for the render network as well, because then we can pop up a real-time viewport or run it locally.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Google doesn't open their models up, so it'd have to be
Yeah.
somebody other than Google to get there.
Yeah. Going back to the 4D video editor, talk to me a little bit more about that, because that's interesting. That's new. That's something very different that you're not seeing in any of these AI workflows.
Yeah, so we built a web-based equivalent of After Effects. So if you go to Render right now and you want to edit an image, we partnered with Photopia, which does literally a Photoshop clone inside the browser. This is something where we brought in a developer that had built basically an After Effects clone in the browser, and I had a whole list of features. And I'm like, this is going to be video.otoy, and I wanted to be able to load in 3D models. I wanted to be able to load in splats, and I wanted to be able to hook up into Octane 2027. So, and provide all those After Effects type layers. I mean, it's a full-on video editor. If you should be able to go to video.otoy.ai now and play around with it and load the examples, load the splat examples, load the video examples. And, and if I'd had more time before Black Friday, I would have shown the Octane viewport running in there as well. So when you're working with any of these things outside of the DCC tool to begin with, or by the way, all these things, since we brought in Ceph, which is a web-based embedded browser inside of Octane Core, we can load up all those pieces inside of any DCC as well. And so the 4D video editor is basically, it's a 3D scene graph that is able to load in all these different asset types, including a full Octane viewport, and allow you to make these changes very quickly locally in the browser. And that can propagate towards any of these other pieces on the rest of the site. So when you want to edit a video or edit something that is effectively a composite of assets that are either 3D based, full scene based like C4D or Blender, Octane based, or that are already saved as a splat or generated as a splat, this tool has all of that in there. And the reason why I like it is that it just allows you to do a lot of stuff very quickly locally and feed that back into the rest of the system. So Canvas has that same functionality for nodes. The 4D timeline has that for time-based spatio-temporal assets, and you need that. And I think we're also going to probably bring Photopia directly into Otoy Studio. There's still some merging pieces between the Render Network site and the Otoy Studio site that I want to, do a little bit more, sort of deeper integration with. So right now, if you go to Otoy Studio and you click on the Render Network, it'll take you to the Render Network portal. But those pieces will be more integrated. There'll be Render Network nodes inside of Canvas and all those other elements that allow you to really, sort of drive this stuff more cleanly. And also, you'll be able to do stuff on the Render Network and feed that into the 4D timeline. Render Network will also have jobs that effectively will render to splats, which will then load into that 4D timeline, right? Versus just rendering to splat is still a render job. It's not instantaneous. It's not like exporting a mesh. Although another 2027 feature that's really useful is being able to export not an OrbX the way it used to be, but a USD file.
Yes.
That will have all the pieces in there, and should be able to be loaded by anything that loads a USD file, as input. Now, packaging all that the way that you do an OrbX, like we could still have an OrbX with a USD, export inside of there, so you can keep it all the same. But the fact that you can do a USD export is probably how it's the future of render, because USD was built for being able to have different stages. All these things that are not in the baked OrbX that should be are all in USD. In other words, being able to have references, being able to have layered the scene, and being able to turn those things on and off, and have almost different branches that allow you to try different things. Those are very useful when you want to automate rendering, right? And also, a lot of the stuff doesn't get saved properly when you export to an OrbX. I mean, in terms of everything's in the lean. USD is a lot more. I mean, instances are much better supported. Nested instances are better supported. And by the way, everything that's inside of an OrbX that's Octane data could be stored inside of a USD, including the material graph, all of that. You can abuse a USD file to do all that sort of stuff. So we would technically, you may not get all the Octane data if you load USD inside, I don't know, some other tool that doesn't have any idea what Octane is, but it is there. So an Octane DCC, plugin that can load a USD file will be able to populate that. But also Octane itself is adding support. I mean, 2026 is support for Material X, Open PBR, which is
awesome.
Between those two, you have a pretty robust set of nodes and materials that is render independent, and Octane obviously fully supports that. So, it's going to be pretty great.
With the 4D video editor, would you be able to composite your AOVs within that?
Oh yeah, it has a video layer in there for that purpose. It can load in video. So if you don't touch any of the 3D or 4D or spot stuff, it's just video, right? And so a lot of the templates are just showing how you can do composited video. And the idea would be that your AOVs out of the render jobs can go into the different tracks, and you can then composite those in there and feed those into different models. So certain models can take a mask and do a style transfer just on that mask, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So that's on my list for the developer is CryptoMat, which, I mean, honestly, you can also just spit out a bunch of different alpha maps and feed that in. So we'll sort those things out. The compositing system in Octane Core is really good. It just doesn't have a great interface. So if you're trying to use that in C4D, I discovered to my chagrin that, I thought maybe in the plugins it would be, there'd be an easier way of integrating. So we have work to do on that even in 2026 and 2027, just on the plugin side. But the idea would be that if you're loading an Octane viewport, you can also composite with the Octane viewport as well, which is incredible power. That is something that, I mean, there's not a lot of compositing tools that have, that are 4 channels of color, spectral color channels and all these other things that are, that can do deep compositing. So I think that there's going to be a lot of utility in the 4D video editor, something we can also embed inside of Octane Core, so it could work as a track, within any of the DCCs as well. The other thing I should mention is that every node that's in like Canvas or that's available on the Otoy Studio website is something that will be a node inside of the core Octane node graph as well. So you can generate something, put it into material. These are things that have been kind of there through a module that we built. But I think we held off a little bit on that to wait until after Otoy Studio was live,
Mm-hmm.
so that you could see about what those 1,000 different pieces would how they could work. But those will be something you can use inside materials, textures, AOVs, all of it within the current Octane node material system or Octane AOV system.
That's cool. That's super
Yeah.
cool. So many
So it'll be
exciting
both for the
things.
web and inside of a DCC. Yeah.
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 And inside the DCC, I'm assuming that's running locally.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Well, no, not for everything.
Yeah.
Some of those tools, some of those models, it'll be like render. It'll have to go out because we have API access to VO. Like Google doesn't
Yeah.
give us the VO model to run locally. So if you want to
Sure.
use
Yeah. Yeah.
VO
Yeah.
for something, but not all the models on Otoy Studio are like that. Some of them can be run locally, and some of them are going to be things that we build in house or that we fine tune and we'll ship with this stuff. So it'll be either or, and that's the thing is
Mm-hmm.
we've always wanted to sort of approach anything that's machine learning based. Some of those things should be baked in, like denoisers, upscaling even, but things that are useful, that are just running on a bunch of, whatever, as I said, a B200, on Google servers, or TPUs. That's the other thing is that there's now this sort of thing where Google's sort of encroaching a bit on NVIDIA's turf with TPUs and offering TPUs to data centers. And we'll have to see how that plays out, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that, there's also a company called Grok that we know very well that we're talking to, that does specialized chips that can run Llama like 10 times faster than it can on a GPU. And that is something that could be applied to image generation, video generation as well.
Mm.
So we'll see. I mean, I'm almost certain that NVIDIA, being who they are, is not going to let, ASICs, eat their lunch. So you'll probably see more and more neural, cores that are inside of GPUs even, or these specialized hardware things that can be sold, outside of Google, outside of Amazon, or outside of these data centers, that might be able to accelerate models like Llama or open weight models like LAN, which are or LTX even, right? Which is why it's interesting to partner with these guys.
Mm-hmm. So cool. So many exciting things coming up.
I
I'm
know.
really excited about it. I really, really am. I'm excited to get my hands on 2026 and start playing with that, but also I cannot wait for 27.
You'll love it.
We've been waiting for
You
real
will.
time for a while. It's
I know.
very
I know.
exciting. I have one last question, bringing back to something we had talked about years ago about integrating multiple render engines inside of Octane. Is that still on the roadmap, or is it because you've integrated stuff
Multi-render.
into USD? Is it
Yeah.
what's is there any updates on that?
Yes. So I didn't put it on the 2020. It's been something I think it's been on a roadmap since 2022. So
Mhm.
and it's been working. Like I've had builds where I've shown like the AOVs. I can mix the storm render and Octane, and I can do a shader that blends us together. So it's been in internal builds for a long time. I decided not to ship it in the production version of Octane for a couple of reasons, and I think that might change. So one of them is that when you have multiple renders, how that and it was a miracle that like when we were able to load Arnold, it was able to kind of like we automatically converted Octane things into preview shaders for USD, and that's how we were able. The thing we have now that we didn't have then is we have OpenPBR and we have Material X, which are they're designed so that you can, if you convert your materials or you stick with that pipeline within Octane, you can load almost any other renderer through the multi-render system that I was showing, and then it'll look really, really, really good. And I think that that's kind of where I wanted things to be at before we ship this thing, because otherwise it's like with Brigade stuff. Like that also, I mean, we did ship, just so people could see that it was real, we did ship the demo showing that Japanese garden scene running with Brigade as we had it, so that, it wasn't vaporware, but it's like from a utility perspective, from a useful perspective, in order to have multi-render really work well, I wanted it to be so you can start with something in Octane and have it convert to Arnold or Redshift or V-Ray or frankly, or RenderMan with something that gets you pretty far along the way and it allows you to do the back and forth. So with OpenPBR, which wasn't even a standard until like this year, or Material X being as mature as it is, so we're going to have something that allows you to take your Octane, your Octane materials and kind of get them into OpenPBR, and it should just natively supporting that. But at the very least, you can also do a material switch and have OpenPBR as an option, right? Just like it is in USD. And as long as OpenPBR looks good in Octane, should look good in all the other renderers that you add through multi-render. And that I think would make this thing a lot more useful. And then the partnerships we have with with Maxon for Redshift and Autodesk for Arnold. I think RenderMan, I think it was a RenderMan 27, I guess, or something. I mean, that looks pretty good too. There's a lot of Hydro Render delegate renders that we could bring in. And then multi-render we have, believe it or not, a render delegate system within Octane Core that can just load those things and pass them in as an AOV, and I think that's useful. So think about that being in the later version of Octane 2027, where you have that live viewport, but you can switch to these other renders, and just like you can sort of switch between different, modes or kernels. That's the idea, and I think that it was premature to try to ship that sooner, but it is on the roadmap. I didn't put it on the 27 list because, again, I want to see where the other renders are at,
Yeah.
make sure this works. But I mean, if there's going to be other features added in 2027, multi-render would probably be one of them. Before the shipping thing, or in a dock version later in the year, because a lot of that work's been done and it's really solid work. Like I don't think other renders have built in a render delegate system within the actual core render the way we have.
Yeah. I would love to be able to, because Octane is just so fast to me. I would love to be able to take a Redshift scene, open it in Octane, and render it in Octane, because I just feel like it would be 10 times faster, And also, Octane's able to, it's, at least from what I've noticed, using other render engines, it's able to handle so much more, like time to first pixel, just so much faster. It's not taking 20 minutes to load into my viewport and stuff. So
no. I mean, and the thing is, it's sad because I've, people have been watching our interviews for a long time know that, I mean, my main, sorry, my screensaver keep peeking here, and it changes the whole lighting. My tool of choice is Octane standalone because of the speed. Because like I instantly things load, and I'm not a modeler, right? I mean, I'm more like I can lay out the scene, I want to change the materials, the lighting, and render stuff and play with that. And so for me, standalone is the perfect tool because it's super fast and it loads things very quickly. So that's sort of like Octane, straight up. I mean, that's like mainlining Octane right into your veins. It's like but I think that even with the plugin layers, and I've worked as hard as I can with each of the plugin devs to try to get, including getting that, for example, the fast viewport pipeline and stuff in there. Even if you don't have the standalone sort of instantaneous feed or whatever, it is really amazing for the IPR and the viewport and being able to load things. And I think the more that we're able to also build inside of the core of Octane that can handle, dynamic stuff. So one of the things I think that's on the 27 roadmap that gets like one line is GPU deformations, but that means you're able to do shaders over a mesh and animate that on the GPU in real time without having to go through the DCC as much, right? I mean, you have displacement already that can do that. But this will be something that you can do. You can basically do, all these sort of shaders, and it's like vertex shaders, but it'll be really fast and it'll be dynamic and can be applied in ways that can be done at render time, which is pretty cool. So, that's something I think, that'll be great.
Okay, last question before we head out. I'm so excited to have had you here, Jules. The last question that I have, because I think we ask this every time: how close to the holodeck are we?
I mean, software-wise, we're getting extremely close. When I look at things like, so the holodeck has two parts. So it's a rendering part, right? Which I think Octane 2027 is pretty damn close to that. And obviously, we've talked about the Light to Lab stuff for ages, which is, that's a whole other story. But the idea of the software pipeline for it is there. I mean, doing ray trace stuff is really powerful. The other part of the holodeck is that you could write a holo novel. You could basically, the average people could sort of interact with it and get it to be what it was supposed to be. When I look at the world model, so when I look at Genie 3, like that interface is how the interface to the holodeck should work. So, because I don't think that people were loading up, Blender to create the holodeck in the 24th century in Star Trek, right? They basically, now, it doesn't mean there weren't people that were doing it offline and building all that stuff. But I do think that the holodeck itself, with some of these workflows where you have some, especially since the holodeck is real time, right? It is real time. The fact that you want to change your scene in real time and change the world in real time probably is something that the player, not the artist or the creator, should be able to do. And I think that the world model stuff I'm seeing is such a huge piece of that. We're getting closer. I think the question is simply, are you going to experience a holodeck in a 2D screen and glasses or on a light field display? All three of those are moving at different speeds. I will say that, I've been working with the Vision Pro stuff since, the launch.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been a huge amount of those sold. So it's because I think that you need to have it in a sunglass form factor. It just has to get there. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that, until it is, it's going to be a tough, but that's going to make a big difference. I do think that ultimately you're going to have glasses that are really small, that are really lightweight, that will give you probably with a mini light field display in there, which will give you sort of multiple focus depths, and then a light field display as well, which will basically be like, maybe a curved one or a wall size one,
Mm-hmm.
where you're going to have, that incredible immersion. But it's very tough. I mean, hardware is a tough business. So it's like, I don't think Apple can predict where they're going to get their glasses, or Meta, or any of the light field display guys. I mean, it's just very, very, very tough. And hardware is hard. On the other hand, software seems to be going pretty well. So I think that the holodeck is getting closer every year. And this year in particular, we'll have a lot of the pieces for that in users' hands and artists' hands, at least on a 2D screen, and possibly on whatever glasses are out there and whatever light field displays are out there in the next 12 months.
That's cool. Are you working
Yeah.
on any more Star Trek shorts?
If I were, I wouldn't be able to talk about that.
That's fine.
Everything we do, but I mean, we are working on more Star Trek stuff, because the
Yeah.
archive. So the website roddenberry.xio, which is
Mhm.
where it's all hosted, is unending. So we're definitely doing more video content. Those shorts though are almost like they're one-offs. Like Paramount is like, you can do one more, and every time it's one. Granted, I will say this: we because Dave Ellison really loved the last one, maybe we'll get another waiver to do another one. I mean, obviously, if we did get that, I probably wouldn't be able to talk about it just yet. So
Yeah.
I just will say that. But I mean, there's for sure we're doing content, and I love Star Trek, and it's just something
I do
that
too.
is, I mean, yeah. So I don't know if I've been on since the last short was released. Was
I
that?
I don't think you have. No.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And
40 million views, which is
yeah.
crazy.
And
More that the Paramount Super Bowl commercial was 36 million views,
uh-huh.
and our video is unlisted, because it had to be unlisted because it had to be embedded in some other site, But
Uh-huh.
yeah, people loved it. Even Shatner, like, because I played it in front of him. The first,
Yeah.
the first time he showed it was on the bridge of the Enterprise in New York at Ticonderoga, where he was there. He hadn't seen the final version because it wasn't done until like the day before. But
Uh-huh.
but when he did see it, he got emotional, and he spent like 20 minutes like grilling me in front of all these fans about like, what are you doing next? Where's it going? How do we, it was an amazing experience.
What I love is that you bring so much history from, like, say, the early novels and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing that within the shorts. It's not necessarily like, oh, here's my own story that I came up with, but it's like, yes, exactly. And
1974, I think this came out, or 76, something like that. But those novels are, I mean, it's not invented stuff. I mean, there's 40% of Star Trek is in the novels and comics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure I'm centered in your views. And when I grabbed the book, it seemed to shift a little bit. But there we go. But yeah, I mean, there's such a rich history there, and some of it is affected. I mean, there are things from the novels that have turned into the what they put in the movies, like the names of a lot of the characters, like Yoda, Spock's full name, Sulu's first name, Uhura's first name, Yoda, Hikaru. Those all came from the novels. Number one, who's now in Strange New Worlds. She was named Una in the novels, and they took that. So the novels are really a huge part of this. And the most important novel for us is the one that Gene Roddenberry only wrote one novel, the novelization of that first 79 movie. And there's just crazy stuff in there. That is, for me, the inspiration for everything we're doing. So even though the shorts skip around and they show different pieces, whatever, it is very much about the 79 movie, because that, to be honest, is the last time that Gene Roddenberry played with Kirk and Spock. And everything after that was like, he couldn't really work with him. And so, when Rod Roddenberry, my partner on all these things, we think about what we're doing to sort of burnish and really explore Gene's legacy of like that movie, and every novel, everything the novel includes, it's not in the film, is a big part of the source material. So, and the novel itself was like the first of, 80 novels that in a series. It was like number one out of 80, right? That was, where people added to the lore, and there's some great stuff in there, like Spock having a child with Saavik in the shooting script of Star Trek 4. But absolutely, their marriage was something that was described in detail in this novel, Vulcan's Heart. And so, like, we just literally filmed that marriage scene, and they have a child, and that child's in unification. Spoiler alert, but
Yeah. That's fantastic. Okay, Jules, thank you so much for joining me on this show. I really do appreciate it. I love the insight. I love how positive you are about this industry, and like how excited you get about like everything. It makes me it makes me excited to be in this industry. So thank you. And thanks everyone else for joining. Make sure to follow us on all the socials, especially YouTube and Twitch. We've been doing our weekly MoGraph Hangouts. We'll continue that. Those are Thursday nights at around 7 o'clock. And we've got a bunch of fun guests coming up on the show. We're going to take the Christmas break after next week. And we'll come back in January. And also, if you haven't done it already, make sure to sign up for your very own MoGraph.com account. It's a one-stop shop for everything a motion designer needs. You can showcase your demo reels, projects you've worked on, post jobs, apply for jobs, sell your digital goods, find meetup groups, or start one of your own. And so much more is planned. We're almost at 1,000 members, which is super exciting. So make sure and check it out. We're an artist-first site, and where your work will always be yours, and it will never be fed to an algorithm. So you'll see everything the way it is. But yeah, Jules, thank you so much for joining. Super excited to have you and talk to you. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely, Matt. It's a pleasure. I love you. I love what you do. It's so great being part of this.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, I'm Matt, and you are Jules, and we will see you later. Later, yo.
Later.
Pretty good, I guess.